everybody. Welcome in. Keenan Austin Reed is trying to get in with us, but we're going to go ahead and kick it off because this is such an essential panel, and it's going to be one that is going to leave you with lots of good advice and perspective for starting your internship. I am going to introduce our panel. These are folks who've made it their mission to support interns, so they know better than anyone about the value of a congressional internship. And I am going to pop over to you, Mauricio. Are there any big surprises for the interns that you help support coming through the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute's programs? What tends to surprise your interns the most about coming to Congress?
Yeah, so first, before anything, I want to thank you, Marcy, and Anne, and the whole Popbox team for inviting us to this great panel discussion. I truly appreciate it. As to your question, I believe the most surprising thing that the interns really encounter through our program, or have encountered through our program, is how receptive and the wanting to help type attitude that Washington, and specifically Congress, has towards its interns. It may sound like a cliche, and it is a cliche, but interns are the backbone of Congress, and it should come at no surprise, because you have interns of 6 to 7 years back now being comms and legislative directors and even chiefs of staffs. So I think it's definitely a positive surprise, and it's always good for them to come here and see, okay, this is what is possible at some point. So I think it's definitely a good surprise for them.
I think that's probably very reassuring for folks to hear. Let's talk about the big picture. Where do interns fit in Congress and government overall? Habiba and Mauricio, your institutions, your organizations are focused on making internships more accessible to students from all backgrounds. Why is it so important to improve access to congressional internships? I'll go to you first, Habiba.
Thank you, Marcy, and I just want to echo Mauricio and thank you and Anne and the Pop-Up Foundation and everyone who's so diligently put this together. Interns are, like, one of the taglines we have part of this group is like, today's interns are tomorrow's staffers, right? So, we want to be able to attract a wide variety of interns to our nation's capital or in the districts or doing this type of work, because we want to be representative of the community that these Congress people are representing, right, at the end of the day. So it's so important to attract interns from the community, especially interns from, marginalized communities. So important to be able to, because at the end of the day, they have such a connection to the laws and policies and things that we're passing that we don't want to leave them behind. So I feel like, it's so important with any workplace. It's so important to attract interns from different backgrounds and different socioeconomics, because interns don't live in their own, vacuum. They're part of the community, and we want to be able to make that accessible, make that paid, which is part of the accessibility, which is why Payer Interns is so working on that. And we want to make it as easy as possible so that they're not just interns, that they continue to be part of contributing to the country, to wherever they decide to go. So that's sort of my thought.
That's wonderful. I want to turn to Nan, because like me, Nan, you were an unconventional intern. You came to Congress after a different career and grad school. I came after law school, and we were a little bit older than the average interns when we got here. What advice do you have for folks who are coming in who might not just be coming in during college or right after college?
Well, first of all, I was lucky in that it was an economic downturn and a lot of people have lost their jobs like me. So my co-intern was an out-of-work lawyer, so that felt a little better. Sometimes it can be kind of a hit to the ego. Like, here I am starting at the beginning. People younger than me are my boss. I've worked with Congress a long time and I kind of know this stuff, but you have to be open to the fact that there's still a lot that you can learn. There certainly was for me. No one cares. And we are all on our own paths. Everyone has, a different path to success, a path that they are, kind of assigned to take in this life, and one is not better than another. So, I had to get over myself really, really quickly.
Well, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I was coming out of law school, and you said you were working with lawyers, others with graduate degrees and professional degrees and many years of experience. And I have to say, it was so incredibly humbling. You find that you may know a lot about your field, you don't know much about Congress until you're sitting there walking those halls, getting lost. I was also walking letters around to get signatures, and that sounds like a task that I shouldn't be very happy about, but I needed to learn my way around. And for those of you who are interning this year, you will not be walking letters around to get signed for the most part, because there's a new digital signature platform. We just held a training session on that yesterday as a part of the Internapalooza, so you can find that video online and find out more about that. But humility is important in congressional internships, no matter where you're starting, because Congress is a completely different beast. Akailah, I want to turn to you, because you welcome interns from across the country as a part of the CBCF internship program. And so you get lots of first impressions of Congress. What tends to surprise your interns the most?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It is great to be here with you all. My name is Akailah Jenkins McIntyre. I serve as the director of the Leadership Institute, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and I use she, her pronouns. I am thrilled to be with you all. So I will say something that tends to surprise our interns, and they speak about it often, is the pace. And so I think that sometimes, no worries, Marcy, welcome back. I think that sometimes it can be a bit, it is important to remain grounded. I will say that because the Hill is extremely fast paced, and there are 1,000,001 things coming at you at any given moment. And the expectation is that it just gets done. Sometimes it's unclear how it will get done, but the expectation is that it gets done. Something that I also think tends to be surprising is about the types of asks that interns are getting. Sometimes they are asked to stretch beyond what they already know, and it requires a certain level of kind of personal onus to figure things out. And so if I were to say two things that consistently surprise our interns, it would absolutely be the pace and the extent to which sometimes they just have to jump right in and learn how to figure things out, even with little direction. And so I think what really tends to set interns apart on the Hill is when they are able to do that, when they are willing to just jump right in and figure it out, even if the instructions are unclear. Often interns are coming and saying, well, these instructions were unclear. And I'm like, well, that's par for the course. You're gonna have to figure it out. So yeah, that's how I think that I would respond to that question, the pace and the extent to which they are expected to jump right in from the beginning.
I could not agree more. That was phenomenal. And actually, speaking of pace and unexpected and jumping right in, of course, as I got kicked offline, Keenan Austin Reed was there to pick up the baton. And I'm so happy to introduce her. She is a former chief of staff. She was on the Hill for many years and is now on K Street, but she's also the founder of Black Women's Congressional Alliance and Black Women Leading, and is a dear friend. And Keenan, I'm going to pass the mic over to you to share your insight and keep the questions going.
Yeah, thank you, Marcy. Marcy and team from the Pop Fox Foundation have been so extraordinarily visionary in bringing this intern palooza together. And thank you, Marcy, for handling this while I was running late. As you all know, not on the Hill anymore, but Congress will throw us some curveballs, won't it? So I hope that that's something that we will dive into with talking about the internship experience today. All of the cool, I think that's one of the most interesting things, that no 2 days of mine in Washington looked alike. And if you're into a sort of adrenaline rush, I think this is the right place for you. So getting back to the questions, I wanted to direct the next question to Habiba. There have been some amazing victories recently for interns on Capitol Hill. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen the congressional internship experience change, particularly over these past 2 years where the world has had to adopt, and thus the internships have had to adopt. Also, congressional interns are, getting more of a fair shake. So I would love your take, Habiba, on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keenan. Definitely. just the pendulum has sort of shifted, just the conversation has shifted. Just even in the last 2 years, we weren't having this conversation about specifically about pay and accessibility. And with the pandemic, you know, we've seen that more folks are able to access these type of internships because they don't have to think about the pay that comes with the financial burden that comes with picking up for a summer or for 3 months during the semester and moving to Washington, D.C., which is one of the highest cities in the nation. So I will say that it's sort of giving a bit share of you know, it's opening up more doors to communities that we don't often hear from. And some of the things that Congress has definitely also shifted in terms of policy, and some of the things that Payer Interns has been working towards. Pay is definitely, it's still very low. Each office still has, at least on the House side, has $25,000. And we're hoping that, speaking of Congress and things being crazy all the time, we're still, believe it or not, working towards FY fiscal year 22 appropriations. And we fought for a couple of things, you know, to include to extend that pay, to increase that pay, you know, so that more folks are able to take advantage of interning and working for Congress eventually. Committee interns don't get paid. There's not a specific pot of money that's dedicated to pay committee interns. That's something we're working on to you know, to alleviate some of the cost that's associated with interning for a committee. You know, in terms of, that's just on Capitol Hill, but we're working a lot on federal agencies as well. White House interns aren't paid still. So there's so many things. One, we will start something, and then as soon as you look into it, there's something else, a hole glaring that we need to fix. But I will say one of the things that I think remote internships have definitely made a difference in the type of interns that we're attracting and recruiting. And that's been something that we're working with this, with the folks in this organization, as well as just folks on Capitol Hill, on intern coordinators as well. That's been really helpful. And one of their recruitment tactics, like, oh, like you can be a college student and you don't have to necessarily come here. Some offices, students and intern coordinators have been really grateful that they're able to attract the type of students they want to attract, while you know, getting rid of that barrier of accessibility of coming here.
Oh, thank you for that. And I just thank you for all of the advocacy that Pay Our Interns has done. It's really created a wave everywhere, and people are starting to question, you know, should they be, or at least starting to figure out how to pay their interns. I wish you and your organization were around when I was interning for free.
Me too. Me too.
Right? Can we get back pay?
Yeah.
Mauricio, I'm coming to you because CHLI has a really unique structure where you rotate between congressional and private sector, which has been my personal life experience. And I find both sides super interesting. For our interns, can you speak about the pros and cons of both the congressional versus the private sector?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the CHLI offers this unique setup through our CHLI Global Leaders Program, where you do a semester-long internship in DC, and it's split up basically into 2 internships. It's 2 months in a congressional office, and then you switch on over to a corporate affairs government relations office. So they are really able to see how it both works, and it works hand in hand, because you know, you get that experience in the congressional office, and then they go to the corporate affairs and they get to see, you know, how the whole process works in terms of, you know, why is there lobbying, and, you know, how does the lobbying work? And usually the lobbyists actually, or the government relations office, usually they actually like that the intern has come from congressional office beforehand, because they get to see the process before, they understand a little bit of how the offices work already. I think the pros and cons from it have really been, you know, opening the eyes of our interns. You know, some have been really reluctant to go into a private sector job because they're like, oh, like this is just very greedy, and you know, they see like the news and they're like, oh, it's like very dirty business. But then they actually get there, and people that probably would have had more inclination towards a congressional office actually come out of there wanting to go into a government relations corporate affairs office. And it's actually very interesting, because like you see that, and then you also see people that have been wanting to do corporate affairs, government relations work, and then they actually like the congressional side more. So they get to appreciate both sides. a lot better, now having that experience and doing that. So I think the pro, the big pro has been understanding of the whole process and wanting to see that. In cons, I don't think that there's much cons to that. I think it's a very good setup, and I can speak to that. Part of the reason that I actually went to CHLI is because I applied myself to the program. So I'm a very big testament as to seeing this program be as successful as it can, because I could have been in their shoes. I wasn't part of it. I got a full-time job at the organization, but I really want to help them and see both sides to it.
Oh, that's a great experience. And I think that's demystifying the going downtown could potentially be just as interesting, and also a way to work with the Hill is very eye-opening for a lot of interns. Intern Mauricio, so thank you for sharing more about CHLI's program and that experience. I'm getting a question in the chat, which I want to throw to the group because I think it's a really good one and sort of inevitable. What are some of the hardest things for interns to navigate as they begin a career on the Hill? Because we talked a lot about the good things, which there'll be an abundance of, but what are some of the challenges? And I want to throw just something on that. How do we navigate those challenges? And that could be for anybody. Nan, I think you're about to say something.
Yeah, I think a lot of interns can have an impulse to demonstrate their value really, really quickly, and to demonstrate how incredibly capable and smart they are. And you are incredibly capable and smart and creative and awesome people who want to come do this. But that can make people tentative about asking for help or asking questions when they should be doing that all the time, because everyone wants to help you. We want you to do your work well and right. So please ask questions. And the cool thing about asking questions, even when you already know the answer, is that the people who you are asking will then feel invested in you, and you're coming to them and saying you're an expert. So people like being asked. You're not an imposition, you're an asset, and then people are invested in your success and will want to continue to help you. So never be afraid to ask all kinds of questions, even of the security guards when you're lost, or other people. Everyone around wants this to be a good experience for you and for you to do a good job.
Perfect. And the question, just repeating it for some of our panelists, what is Nan, thank you for your answer. What are some of the hardest things to navigate on the Hill, and how do we tackle those challenges? Nan spoke about asking questions, and that gets people brought into the process. Any other challenges that that you all, as people who manage, lead intern programs, do you see interns face coming to DC, and what strategies have they used to overcome those challenges?
I can just add here that I think that interns are consistently told about the power of networking without necessarily knowing what that looks like in practice. And so consistently interns are hearing, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. DC is a small city, you've got to know folks. All of those things are absolutely unequivocally true. And when you are coming into a new space, particularly a space like Capitol Hill, where it can be intimidating and you're an intern, sometimes it can be tricky for interns to determine what it looks like to successfully navigate networking. And so what I would say is that it is incredibly important to be intentional, one, about the people you reach out to, using your supervisor as someone who can connect you with other people on the Hill as well. But networking calls do not need to be an hour. when you are going into networking calls, people on the Hill are really busy. It is important that you attend those meetings in a timely fashion and that you have your questions and your intentions ready to go. It should not necessarily be a casual, so what are you into kind of conversation. You've got to be ready because first impressions really do matter as it relates to networking. And so what I would say for people who are consistently told networking matters and don't necessarily know how to get into that, I would say to reach out to the people in your placement to ask them for 15 minutes and to be ready and available when they are available, because sometimes they will miss the appointments that you make. It is par for the course. You should follow up. You should be persistent, and perhaps you should even be intentional about letting them know specifically what it is that you want to discuss, so that when they come to that conversation, they are prepared and know what they are walking into. But don't always expect that people are going to have an hour to give you. They likely will not. It's always go, 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 and on to the next thing. And when you are thinking about how you can get into those networking relationships, just be intentional about who you reach out to in your office and how you are approaching those interactions. But definitely start with your office. And should certain networking calls go well, they can usually connect you to other people as well.
And we got a fantastic follow-up, Kayla, to your question, which I thought was a real pro tip. Can we add you on LinkedIn? Can we add the panelists on LinkedIn? I thought that was really smooth to slip in. I'll start with me. Yeah, you can absolutely add me. I think that's a great way to stay in touch with folks. And you know, to your point about making sure that you come to these coffees prepared, that's absolutely right. Making the most of that time and also doing your homework on who you're in front of, because if you make the most of that 15 or 20 minutes, you have a new advocate for you. Anyone else want to jump in on the barriers, questions, the hard things folks face?
I can speak to this a little bit just because, like, I think if you're coming from a bit of a different background, I think that's something that I certainly struggled with. And when I was an intern coordinator, I've seen some of my interns also struggle with is imposter syndrome and feeling like you don't belong. And I think that can be said. I was an intern coordinator in the senator's office in the state, but when I moved to DC, it was even more glaring to be in the Capitol and dealing with these issues. And I think that sometimes it's so difficult feeling like you belong in this space. It is a very intimidating space, like Keenan already mentioned, and about, you know, networking and all these things. But I would say that also, Akailah was just mentioning being intentional about that as well. You know, like you're there because you belong there, first of all, and that the office wouldn't have hired you if they didn't want you to be there. So a lot of time, I think it's like, it's in our head and like, we're like, oh, like, am I doing this correctly? And like, you know, asking questions and asking for clarifications, asking for directions, all those things will help you. And finding, you know, doing things outside of the work, the work office. So going to, you know, briefings are a big thing. Like that's how you met people, like, you know, taking an hour of lunch or 30 minutes or whatever you can get away from your desk and meeting other folks that look like you, that come from the same sort of background, to kind of get rid of this, this imposter syndrome need is also something that I think that it's difficult to navigate as an intern. And also I think it weaves its way into when you become a staffer and a working professional as well. That's something I will also add.
Yeah, we definitely agree with you. Later during the Intern Palooza, you all will have an opportunity to talk to some of the Congressional Staff Associations. That's a great way to find other staffers like you and can network in a sort of a different way if you're dealing with, you might be the only whatever in your office and you're just looking to connect with staff with a similar background. It's another tool in the toolbox, but I think 100% of people deal with imposter syndrome, but that's a really great point, especially when you're new and don't quite understand Washington yet. Mauricio, any thoughts? After Mauricio, I can go to our next question.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of the imposter syndrome is being genuine, you know, and being intentional, like how Akailah mentioned as well. You know, when you're meeting these people, they want you to be yourself. They want you to not put up an act, and and that's kind of a struggle that people have, not being their genuine self, because you can take a million networking meetings, but those million networking meetings are not going to really help you. You have to be genuine as to what you truly want to do, and not just take a meeting to just take a meeting. It's genuine to yourself, but genuine also to the person, because their time is valuable. So they don't, they're going to have lots of interns that are wanting to take these meetings as well. And if you're just doing it just to get that meeting, it's not fair to them as well. So I would just say be genuine to the whole situation, be genuine to yourself as to what you truly want to do and who you want to meet. And those people will appreciate your genuineness. They'll appreciate, your interest in what they're doing. And I think it's just better when it comes to that. And I always tell our interns every time that they come, through our program is don't act a certain way just because you're meeting with someone. They don't like that. A lot of people can see right through that. So I think it's very important to kind of point that out to them.
Mauricio, authenticity. Okay, that's an important one, being yourself. And it can be tough because you see people, so many folks act a certain way on the Hill and speak a certain way. My first time in DC, I noticed folks wrote letters in a certain way and all of that, and it can all be intimidating, but the best way to be is be yourself. That's great advice. Guys, there are so many good things that you can get from an internship, your resume, connections, all of that. But what are some of the benefits that you find people overlook beyond the obvious? What's the juice in getting an internship? What are the values that had folks not been smart enough to come to this wonderful panel today and hear from these experts that they would miss?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's not all like really nice aspirational things. There's a lot of jobs that like you simply can't get unless you have this on your resume, even if you have the skills that you would obtain during a Hill internship. Like, people just want to check that box. So that's important. But again, I think I mentioned it earlier, on an intangible level, you're going to learn things that you can't under any other condition, and you hopefully will be a lot more empathetic with the interns that you meet as your career moves forward.
Nan, is it fair to say that if you're looking at two folks with very similar profiles, but one of them has done a congressional internship, that person see more favorably in terms of getting a job?
I mean, it depends on the job, but most likely, I mean, if it's a job in DC, if it's a job related to anything interfacing with the Hill or communications or, things like that, then for sure. And if you want to continue to work on the Hill, you must have had a Hill internship, because all the jobs say, even for the most entry-level jobs, you have to have all this experience. That's impossible to get without experience. It's a real catch-22. And so when I was unemployed, like it kind of sucked in a way, but I was just like, well, I'm not getting the jobs I want, even though I have those skills and I have worked with the Hill for many years. Like, I'm just not going to get what I want unless I, step up and do this. And I was lucky in that an internship kind of landed in my lap with an office I had worked with before. And I was able to nanny on the side. I was a mother helper at night, doing people's laundry, taking kids to hockey practice, and I hustled when I wasn't in the office and made it work.
There you go. And that's a testimony right there.
We've all been there. I think it's awesome that people get paid now, even if it's just a little, but also, man, do I admire the interns I've had. And I actually do favor interns who I know are working other jobs, because like, man, I know you have the best work ethic. Also, I know that we understand each other And I just admire that kind of hustle.
Oh man. Speaking of hustle, getting a question, how long after an internship should you reach out to the office staff for a coffee chat? So you've gotten your internship done. How long should it be before you actually reach out?
So I would say that perhaps those conversations should be happening while you were still in the office. And so I wouldn't necessarily wait until after you have finished in order to, again, the hill moves very fast. And so I would say that the best time to have those chats is while you were still in the office and not necessarily after you have finished the internship. Of course, you could still do so after you finished it, but I would definitely recommend doing it while you were in the office.
And if you're like a super introvert like me who just knows how to play a friendly person when I need to, sometimes I just like would set goals for myself. Like I'm gonna meet with one new person every week, or if you're at an event, I'm going to talk to X many new people, and then I get to peace out and go be happy in my pajamas.
Great advice, especially the pajamas part.
I would agree with Keila as well, and have those conversations like while you're there, like make sure that you're like meeting with your team. Actually, I think that's something a lot of interns overlook. I think that they're like concentrating on the bigger picture and like meeting with other people, but like your team is also full of, you have the staff assistant, you have LDs, you have communications directors, you have the chief. You should start with your office and have those coffees while you're an intern. And I think that I found the best time to do that because everyone's so busy during recess, which they don't technically happen anymore. It seems like that's when folks had a little bit of time. So start that. But I do say that if you do reach out afterwards, like there should be a reason, like a specific reason, like, hey, I'm interviewing for this office, or hey, like I am applying to law school, or like I need a letter of recommendation, I need something to kind of like get that conversation going. But I'm sure like as a former intern coordinator, I'm always happy to hear 3 years past my internship, I'm writing a letter of recommendation for someone. So like, staying in touch is really great, but like doing it so like intentionally at the end of the day is sort of what I would say.
Yeah, Habiba, I would agree with that. And one pro tip that I've seen some interns use, guys, is like periodical updates. To Habiba's point about staying in touch with your intern coordinator, as you are going through school or you are experiencing reach outs for interviews, letting the office know is another way of staying in touch. It's not just a chat. And also, as Taylor suggested, LinkedIn, if you're posting on LinkedIn and you've got folks that in your network that you want to stay in touch with, that's another way to stay in front of people. Getting another question in the chat here. What are some of the key virtues that you believe are valuable when working on the Hill for a congressman or congresswoman? Key virtues that are valuable. Well, while the panelists are thinking of it, I'll start off with discretion. So when you work in a congressional office, you're going to deal with a lot of sensitive information, things. If you're taking calls from constituents or privy to staff meetings, there might be information that is very private and should not be discussed outside of the office. So as much as you want to go tell mom and dad about the inner workings, or you want to tell your friends about what's happened in the office, your chief and other leadership in the office are going to ask that you keep that stuff private for many reasons. A lot of times it's the protection of constituents. Perhaps it might be a part of the legislative strategy. But that's just one that I've asked staff as a former chief to observe. I'll go to my panels now. Other thoughts on key virtues of good interns or great interns? Man, I think I see you coming off mute.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have curiosity. It is really easy for an intern to just kind of have a boring internship if you only care about staying in your lane and doing assignments as they come, and never, asking, never going to events, never going to hearings, or just taking advantage of all the stuff that you can while you're an intern, and trying to explore the issues that interest you and asking for more work in those areas. If you're not curious about anything, it's going to be a boring time and you'll be perceived as a boring person.
Curiosity, that's important. And curiosity demonstrates interest. Yeah, that's a great point. Mauricio.
Yeah, I think the thing that the offices, and usually I would say the offices, not the congresswoman or congressman, are being personable. Those interns being personable, have a personable attitude is good, but always knowing your line, drawing the line. They don't want someone that's just going there, doing the work, and then kind of leaving. They want to also, know who you are, have, like mentioned before, those chats with your office staff, because they're truly going to be the ones that help you later on. If you're really interested about a career in Congress, you want to have that connection to that office, because they may be the ones that are writing your letters of recommendations later on. They may be putting in that word. So being personable is going to give you that it factor, for them to write a good one, not write just your standard, very, generic letter, right? And, if they ever call that office and say, oh, do you know this person? They definitely did know you. But again, like I mentioned, drawing your line, not being too personable that, you might come off as disrespectful. So I think that that's something of a virtue that I've encountered with our interns before.
I would say I agree with everything that has been said thus far. CBCF interns know this because we drill it into them like no other. I will say timeliness is important. And it is important to know members on the staffers on the Hill, they will be late. Okay, they will be late. They will miss meetings. They will forget that the meeting was even supposed to be happening, okay? Because they are moving in a million directions. I think it's important to know for interns that does not give them the permission to do the same thing. And so it is something that I think is a really great virtue, is not only timeliness, but being proactive. And so being clear about the skill sets that an intern, being clear about the skill sets that they have and what they can offer to the office. So if an intern sees that especially since a lot of you all are, what are the generations? I don't know, Z, whatever it is. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Like, y'all know the TikToks and the Instagrams and all those things.
It's the TikTok generation.
Yes, the TikTok generation. You all know how to spice up their social media and make things engaging. Some of the skill sets that some of the staffers in your office may not have. And so I would say that a really good, outside of timeliness and being on top of it, is also identifying the needs of the office and being intentional about matching your skill set. I don't know if this is answering the question at this point. I'm just saying things. So
no, we need all of it. Give us more.
So being intentional about determining the needs of your office and where your skill sets may be able to support that office. But there's a fine line, right? So it should not be, I am now your social media person, everyone come to me, right? So you should not be doing that. Everything should be going through your supervisor. So it's important to both appear humble while also indicating what you know and how you could be of support. So this would sound something like, hey, I've noticed XYZ. I have experience doing XYZ. Could you use support in that realm? As opposed to waiting for tasks to always come to you, being proactive in a fashion that does not make it seem as though you are coming to try to take over the office when you first got there, right? It's important to remember that you are still an intern. But I would say that something that really does make interns stand out outside of timeliness is anticipating the needs of offices, because again, they are moving in a million directions at once. So yeah, I am always impressed with our interns who are not only early, but also are able to say, hey, I've noticed XYZ, could you use support with that? Framing is important though. Framing is important for sure.
Yeah, the big anticipation and also navigating those inter-office politics too is so important. Other thoughts, or I'll go to my next question.
I would say something Marcy already touched on a little bit earlier is being humble and having humility. I think is also another one that I think that when we come here, we think like glamorous and all the things that I'm going to be doing, but some things are just very boring. Like some things that offices need. Some days I really just need the phones to be answered, you know, and that it's not like you're not going to the hearings, you're not going to like the big receptions, you're not doing all that. So like sometimes actually just being able to helpful, I think is also another one, and just like kind of doing what needs to be done and not thinking that you're beneath it. Like I just feel like Nan already mentioned, just like some things were just not beneath it. Like if I need you to just like make 1 million like floor cards today, like that's literally what my member needs, and I need to do it, and then like you're gonna like help me do that. So you know, just kind of figuring out what the need of the office is, and kind of just doing that, and sort of sometimes laying low is really helpful, and just kind of instead of going to the bigger picture of everything, just sort of what getting back to what the job requires and being helpful. And I have always found that to be, and that's the intern that's going to work hard. If I'm going to recommend something or a job opens up in the office, like a staff assistant position opens up, I know that you can already do the mail. I know that you can already, you know, answer the phone, and I can trust you to do that. So that's like the person that I'm likely to like hire at the end of the day. So like, that's something I would add to as well.
Love that. You sort of are always auditioning for your job, because sometimes things open and you don't even know that they're at, you know, it's not publicly advertised. It's a great point, Habiba. So guys, sometimes in this hyper polarized environment, we get a lot of news and people have a lot of opinions about what's happening in Washington. And your family may be skeptical or scared to send you to DC. And may give you some pushback about accepting an internship in Congress. For example, some folks may say, Congress is so broken. Why would you want to be a part of that process? What do you have for interns who may be dealing with family who's not experienced DC before, so unfamiliar with it? I know I was the first in my family to live in Washington and be a part of government in this way, or people who are just skeptical. They see so much vitriol on the news and get a lot of mixed messages that may not be comfortable with sending the young person in their life to be a part of this process. How would you direct those remarks for that young person that's pursuing an internship? What should they say to those family members or friends who are scared or skeptical? I'm going to pick on Mauricio because he's, you know.
Yeah, I actually.
Come on, Mauricio, help me out here. My parents are hating on my internship. I want to be in DC. So what do I say? How do I navigate this? Because this can be complicated stuff, because in some cases, you know, their blessing is, it matters whether you can actually do this or not.
Yeah, and it's actually not just in DC. Coming from a Hispanic family, it's very uncommon to do internships. You know, I was the first person in my family to ever do an internship as well. And they were like, what are you even doing? Are you getting money for this? Like, and I was like, oh no, I'm just getting experience. And they were very skeptical about that. And then put in the fact that you're going into something like politics or government, they're like, oh, that's a dirty business. It's a tough sell to your parents. It's not easy, but then you kind of walk them through and let them know, look, it's for my benefit. That is how things are happening. And you have organizations like PR Interns, of course, that are trying to have less of that disparity amongst, communities of color, which most likely would have not been able to take an internship on the Hill because, they weren't paying, or, something like the White House too, that they don't pay their interns. And, someone like myself that most likely would have probably not been able to take an internship unless I try to explain, this is how I'm going to get a future job later on. And it did work. And, I think that they understand now, and they understand from my brother, from my younger brother, they're going to understand, okay, take an internship, take an unpaid internship. Hopefully it's not unpaid, right? But, walking them through and telling them there's a bigger goal in mind is always important. But yeah, it is a tough discussion, at least being the first one in the family to do so.
Well, I have to shout out the CBCF. They have been paying and taking care of interns for a long time, long before the movement. I remember having 4 interns in the office, and one would be CBCF, and that one would be the one with the housing and the networking and programming and relationship building. So a shout out to CBCF for always sort of being forward leaning on that movement. Any other thoughts, guys, on if people are having trouble and need to navigate that conversation? Or go ahead, Akailah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keenan.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, first things first, I appreciate that shout out. Thank you so much. The other thing that I will say, just from like my DEI lens, is that, right, like paying interns is an equity issue, specifically for communities of color. And so when we are paying interns, when we are housing interns, we know, and even some of the pushback that can come, I think this is sometimes a different conversation for those whose families come from immigrant backgrounds, for those whose families come from lower income communities, right? Some of the pushback about the climate of DC is a whole other conversation. But so too, when we're talking about unpaid internships, and the reason that we are intentional about paying our interns and housing our interns is because we know that communities of color are more likely to experience poverty, right? When we talk about systemic oppression and racism and how those things work, the trickle down effects show up still today. And what that means is less access to capital and more risk for those communities. And so when we are paying our interns and we are housing our interns, listen, thank you for the shout out, Keenan, because I keep telling them they don't know how good they have it. When we are doing those things, it is also an intentional pushback against the systemic barriers that we know communities of color, specifically Black communities, are facing. And so I think that too, when we consider some of the pushback that may be coming from families, we still too have to consider where some of those things are coming from. And so I think this is a both and conversation for sure. It is not unfounded for folks to be concerned about, the climate. That is not unfounded. But so too, when we think about the opportunities that are afforded to some interns and what their particular backgrounds are, some of those concerns are also kind of laden with the oppression that certain communities can face. And that sometimes certain people from certain communities just can't afford to take an unpaid internship. And we have to think critically about what that means. And so I would really investigate the why. And so if your family is saying, I don't know about you going to DC and being, I think that I would be intentional about investigating the why and ensuring that you can get down to that. So outside of you being their baby who they love very much, what is it that is resulting in some of that pushback about you coming, and thinking critically and talking through with them what this opportunity could set you up for in the future? Because quite often, especially when we're talking about families, they are thinking about in the immediate moment. I think it's important for you to project out what you want for your future so that you are able to effectively communicate that with your family members, i.e., what this is going to set me up for is fill in the blank. The reason that I am doing this is so that long-term I will be able to fill in the blank, perhaps letting them know the types of things that you are doing on the Hill once you get there, and saying, hey, I got the opportunity to chat with this person. They do this, so that they know it is not just you coming to twiddle your thumbs, but that you are very intentional in what you were doing and how you were doing those things. So I would absolutely say to be intentional about investigating the why.
Oh, I love that. Get to the heart of it. I'll give a shout out to the Intern Palooza. I mean, they and Pop Fox Foundation. A lot of these conversations are being recorded, so there's a lot of content now to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and so maybe some of these videos and these conversations could be helpful to your family members too, in terms of explaining the value of internships, so you can hear from. Sometimes it's helpful to hear other validators. Other thoughts for our interns?
I'll tell you a funny story.
Ooh.
So I'm a very, very old person. I didn't.
Nan, we're not going to accept that, Nan. I reject that.
But it was a very different atmosphere when I started here. It wasn't this place that makes me just sad and angry all the time. And it wasn't so toxic and hard. It wasn't. And my first internship here, I was lucky in that I had found an internship where I had housing and it was paid, and they even gave you some food, which was amazing because I'm from a really rural area of Pennsylvania. My family did not have money and no one had done anything like this or left the area before, and it wouldn't have been possible at the time. I did receive pushback from my dad though, because cities are evil. He wanted me to be a national park ranger. And so even though he supported me coming, even though like he wouldn't come visit, he did send me for months a crime of the day email. It was ridiculous. So you have to deal with that. But now I would tell people, if it is such a horrible place, isn't it important that good people work there? Isn't it important that people like me who want to serve, who want to change things, who and my heart, isn't it important that I go and be the ones working there and making that change? And I know that's a big part of why Intern Palooza is happening, why we have Capital Strong, why we have all these other organizations to support interns, because we want only the best here. So we've got to make it better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nana. You reminded me that when I was in college, I tried to change my major from business to political science because of my internship experience. And my parents were watching the news, and the mayor had gone to jail, and a lot of his staff had, and they wouldn't let me change my major, and they wouldn't let me be in political science because of those things, and had to have a completely different career, only to come back to Washington at 28 years old. So guys, do better than me. Use these arguments that the panelists are putting together, pursue your future, because you know where you need to be. This is a very one of a kind experience that you really can't get outside of Washington. So it's worth, if you're having troubles like Nan talked about and I talked about, it's worth fighting for. Well, guys, I think we've come to that point. Let me remind our watchers and our viewers. This is really unique in that you got all 4 of these very smart panelists in one place. So I would encourage you to use the question and answer function, because these coffees, you gotta schedule them, but you can get your questions answered right now. So I'm giving you one last shot before we close out to ask your questions. Otherwise I'll get mine in. So I'll ask my question, but if I get another question in the chat from our viewers, I'll pop that in. Really curious, because Nan sent me down memory lane. When you all intern, what was your most, do you have a memorable experience? What was a time that just made it all worth it? Or even if it was a tough moment, because sometimes we learn in those we screwed it up, but thank goodness you screwed it up so that you could learn and learn from that mistake, and it proved to be valuable later in your career. But I'm looking to close on a high note here, because Washington is tough and internships can be tough, and even if you're going to make some money, it's probably not enough, but it's so worth it. And so I want everyone to hear from you. what was it that you enjoyed while you were there? What was your memory?
So I think that when I interned in Congress, I think the most memorable moment was really meeting the representative. It was the Senator Marco Rubio, and to me that was like I had seen him only on TV, and I had only heard about him, and then you kind of meet them, and you're like, oh wow, this is just a normal person that ended up being the senator to a whole state, and you kind of put it back into perspective, and are like, this is all in the name of public service, and they all want to help out as many individuals as possible, and they truly care about the people that they represent. And you kind of put aside all the things that you hear in the media, and it really does put you into a human moment, and it lets you see them as like these normal people. And it's always a great thing that you can just put yourself, and you're like, okay, that could actually be me at one point. That could, and it's always a humbling moment, just seeing that, and being able to meet all these members in person. I think it's a cool experience, and I think that was my most memorable moment, because that was the first member I had ever met.
Nice. Habiba, I see you leaning in. You ready?
If you are a state district intern staffer, I would say make sure you know the airports in your area and don't send your member to a different airport.
What? That's a story. Come on, what's the story?
The scheduling team and everybody was like, we're gonna have the member, and we're planning this event. There's like a press conference. They're doing all these events throughout upstate New York, and we're ready, and we're like, where's everybody? And they're like, no, she landed on the airport that's like 45 minutes away, not the one that's here. So then I have to take a lift and then go get the senator, which is fine, but I would say that that's like a memorable one, and it was also really crazy. But she was fine, and we got to take a tour of the city together. I would say that, I wouldn't recommend that, but it like turned out fine, and we got to know each other, and sort of everything was fine at the end of the day. But I would just say that's a caution. But when I got here, kind of seeing all the work that you're doing, starting something and then getting it to the middle part, and then like finalizing it, like planning the press conference. And I think I'm a first generation kid. So like my family has been in the country less than 20 years. So for me to be here and doing that, it's just not something I've ever imagined. So having these moments, like Mauricio just mentioned, like all these folks that I would see on TV and actually now walking down the halls of Congress was just like a really just an opportunity I just never thought I would have. But I got to be here and got to do that, and I got to share stories like that. So yeah.
How about the mistakes about to come back? So you came on back, you
Yeah.
made it a tour. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your memory? What tell us something that stuck out to you during your time?
So this is so interesting, because people often assume because I direct the Leadership Institute that I was an intern on the Hill. I never was. So Nan's face. Nan, you were very entertaining to me. I was never an intern on the Hill. So I come from a teaching background. And so it is just what I have learned about being on the Hill is from working with hundreds of interns. And so that is where my experience comes from, and us having a very large alumni base. But I learn from you all because I just, from seeing it happen so many times, I'm able to kind of see, all right, this is what has been successful. This is what has not been, and those kinds of things. And of course, I hear lots of stories from our alumni. But in an interesting turn of events, I was never on the Hill. So there's that fun fact for the day.
Well, do you have an early job experience as, a young, like you starting out your career, taking you back some, like that you just, lesson learned, or something that even led you to the Congressional Black Caucus?
I do.
Yes,
and I try to always mention this, not because it was like a debacle that totally happened, but do not CC everyone, okay? The reply all is a dangerous thing, okay? I actually do not have I think I did, well, Yeah, this was when I was in college, but somebody I knew replied all, something that was like to hundreds of people and was very inappropriate. And oh gosh, I will just say the horror stories that I have seen were as a result of reply alls. Please be sure that when you are replying to emails, you are replying to the people who you need to reply to. People will become extremely annoyed with you if you are that person who is always replying all to things that should not be. That also is in alignment with the discretion piece, right? Like if you are replying with information that everyone is not supposed to have, yikes.
I just want to +1 and hallelujah. Every bit of that, the reply all is probably the most important tidbit you can take away. Keenan, Akailah, Habiba, Mauricio, Nan, thank you all so much for this incredible panel. Keenan, any last thoughts as we close?
Guys, if you've turned into Internpalooza, you are already one step ahead of the game. Keep investing in yourself and you will have a very long, fruitful career in Washington, career in Congress, and reach out to me via LinkedIn. I am for the young people, and everybody that you see on here is for the young people. So please stay in touch with us. Thank you.